All right, you guys, we are seeing you come into the room. I see Darren Schwartz. I see Mark. I see Samuel, Anna, Alan. Welcome, you guys. We see you coming in the room. Don't worry. We see your names. We can't see the fact that your dog's barking in the background, the kids are behind you, or you're still in your PJs. But we want to know where you're coming from. So if you are here, hop over to the chat window and say hi. So Andrew Essingson, let me know where you are coming from. Caitlin Voss, we want to hear, where are you coming from? Eli, Edna, Frank, let us know where you're at. Darren saying hi, y'all, from Chicago. What's up, Darren? We're so excited to have you here. And we have Jacob and John, or Jan, Josh Guest, Katie, Katrina. Such a full room. I was just sharing with John and Annie that we had folks in the waiting room early today because people want to hear about bathhouses and cities, and they're excited to hear about Alchemy Springs. So you guys, welcome. So glad you're here. Nick Van Buren, what's up, Nick? From BC and Haven. Oh my gosh, you guys go check out Haven saunas floating over there in BC. Super cool stuff happening. We got Jacob from Edinburgh, Scotland. We got a worldwide audience today, John and Ann. We have people from across ponds and in multiple countries. And we got multiple Canadians. I'm seeing Alan and some other folks. How are things today in the Bay Area? Well, a few more people get in the room. You guys are hanging out on West Coast time today, Pacific time, starting the day with us. John, how are things there?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I was saying it's it's one of these like crisp fall days. It's 50 degrees and there's very little wind, right? So it's a very still day, and it's you step out of your space or into nature, and just like very peaceful. It's kind of, and I was saying it's kind of perfect for sauna. So yeah, really nice to be here today.
'Tis the season. And you look like you're in an art gallery today, which I think we're going to hear more about. The fact that you guys are fusing bathhouse, community space, and art. How are you feeling today as we kick off and as you sort of spin all the business plates, right? I mean, we were talking before, it's like, hey, this is real. This isn't just like we get up on stage, hands-on business calls right before this. And she's like, I need to kind of reset before we go. How are you feeling now?
No, I'm feeling good. I mean, the minute I step into this space, it feels like a second home. So feeling good.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, you are all in for a treat today. So we're going to give some introductions in a minute. Before we do, I want to talk about how we interact in this space and what we're up to. Thank you to everybody who's already been in the chat window right now saying where they're coming from. When John and Ann drop, tweetable quotes and repostable quotes, put those in there. When you have big sort of moments that you want to share, Nick Van Buren, if you want to rep your biz, put the link in there. People have resources. Let's make sure this is us hanging around the coffee table, talking together. We're in this digital space now, but we are going to kind of interact while we're in there. Hi, Caitlin from Denver. Hi, Anna from Seattle. We can see you right now. We're doing it. We're interacting. Now, if you have a question, we aren't going to save time at the end for Q&A. We're going to talk like we're around the coffee table together, and we're going to answer your questions throughout. But it's not, don't save them till the end. Send them over, and there is a Q&A button that should be on there. And that Q&A button is where you can put those in. And Lindsay, who's our back of house right now, she's going to be able to moderate those, and we'll be getting to those along the way. So please, all the questions, we're around the coffee table. We're so glad you're here. And we are talking about one of my favorite topics today, and that is how specifically bathhouses are impacting communities. And John and Ann are specifically looking at big urban areas and cities and why cities need bathhouses. And so by way of introduction, I want you guys to meet Ann and John. They are the co-founders of Alchemy Springs in the San Francisco Bay Area. You're going to hear all about it. And you have a background in kind of all things people and culture and marketing and storytelling. John, background in community and people, and how do we actually take these big companies doing all these things and help marshal people around the cause. And now you've flipped the cause, right? For both of you guys, you found, wait, the goal for us now is to be able to get people into these spaces of hot and cold and wellness and connection. And so thank you both for being here today. And thank you for being here. We've sort of known each other via text thread for, I think, years now. And it's been years that I've wanted to have this conversation in public with other folks. And so first off, thanks for being here. We're so honored that you're with us today, and you're going to get to drop a whole bunch of good stuff for the folks that are watching.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So let's dive in, you guys. Like we said, let us know where you're coming from. Check out the links in there. Lindsay sent over the Alchemy Springs link. I do want to hear, let's get a sense of who's in the room with us, though. We're going to send over a poll, and this little poll is going to come at you, and we're going to find out, are you interested in the business of sauna as somebody who's an enthusiast? You're a supporter, you're doing this, you love to go to businesses like this. Perhaps you're thinking about starting a sauna business of some kind of way. You're like, man, I want to sit in John and Ann's seat in the near future, which I would just warn you, you're going to hear the war stories today and the good stories. It's not just going to look like, shiny Instagram posts. Or perhaps like a couple of us on here, we saw Victoria, you were just mentioning this, you're working on one, launching. Nick was opening one, or has one open. Maybe you're somebody who's running a business right now around this and in this sphere. As we're getting those answers coming in, you guys, and I just want to give us a little, before we do the snapshot of what's happening today at Alchemy, how the heck did you get into this, right? Give me the little bit of the backstory of how you arrived at this, because I think people are going to want to hear that.
Yeah. So, there was a few different threads in my life. I lived abroad in London for 10 years and traveled a ton in Europe. So I sort of first got to experience the tradition there, the Hungarian baths, the UK baths, and loved it. And then I had moved to New York, and I had kind of my own health journey from living in a water damaged building. And, New York is the city that never sleeps. The entire social life was around eating and drinking, and those were things I couldn't really do. And so I was desperate for ways that I could still socialize and be healthy. I found it was often very isolating. I wouldn't go out because I didn't have things I could do that was healthy. But obviously, New York has some great bathing spots. And then I moved to San Francisco, and I saw how, busy the local sort of social option was, but it wasn't, I love it, but it wasn't sort of designed forward and hadn't really been built with the intentional community around it. And honestly, though, what I like to say now is people are like, how did you get into this? I'm like, this is what I was always meant to do, because my entire life I've been a connector amongst all the social groups. And my greatest joy is when I saw, people on my wedding day from all the various parts of my life getting along. So I'm like, oh yeah, of course, this is just what I was always meant to do.
I love that. I love that sentiment. And I think that, it can be, when we're in business circles, there's hopefully a tug of calling, but also a tug of running the numbers and figuring out the bit. I think we're going to hear some of that from you guys around this. Both you guys hold this tension really well of mission, purpose, calling, and how do we build a business that functions and makes profit and creates jobs and actually gets built and works, right? And sometimes people fall off either end of that, right? They just do a thing because it might make a quick buck, or they just shoot for the woo-woo and miss the business plan. Woo-woo is a technical term, you guys who are following
Certainly
along.
On this coast, yes.
On this coast. Love that kind of backstory there. I want to come zoom back around to our poll real quick, and then we're going to hear from John. So Linz, can you put that poll up? We got some enthusiasts here, some people that are just ready to book their session at Alchemy Springs next time they're in the Bay Area. So we got like 7% of the folks there. Our big chunk, about 2/3 of our audience, is folks that are really thinking about starting a business around this. And so glad you're here. I think you're going to get sort of probably almost a decade's worth of war stories from these guys in this call. So you're welcome. It's going to be great. And then to our folks, about 1/3 of us who are running businesses right now, oh my gosh, we're so glad you're here. We see you, we're with you. We know how hard it is, and we want to see you keep going. So thanks everyone for being here. John, as we get going, I'm going to share my screen and you guys are going to sort of like kind of give some kind of what alchemy is today. And you kind of put some of these pieces together. I do want to ask before we get into that, give us your 30-second of how you got connected to Anne and what the starting point, what the germination of this was.
Totally. So yeah, my background is in community building. I've done that for about 15 years in my career. And it's like, what does that even mean? It means more or less creating environments that connect people such that they could become friends, perhaps even outside of what you're building, right? And so I worked with a group called Summit Series from the early days, Summit Series being a gathering and an event series for entrepreneurs, artists, scientists, musicians, people from all walks of life leading different industries. And so it's up to us to make friends amongst these people, again, from different leaders from all walks of life. We were most known for being the stewards and buying a place called Powder Mountain in Utah. And it's funny, one of the first things we did there was we built this like little pop-up spa. So we had a jacuzzi and a steam room and like a meditation ashram space. And we're more or less studying how people connected and creating different environments for that really, felt surreal and amazing. And it was that spa environment that I found to be the most connecting, right? The most nurturing, and the place that, especially at a more networking style experience, you don't know who's who, right? So you kind of drop that feeling of imposter syndrome, you drop into your own being as a human. And then that's the magic of connection within the sauna or steam room space. And it became my fascination, right? So then I started studying bathhouses. I've been to, over 80 different bathhouses throughout the world and met Anne at Summit. We hit it off right away and we were off to the races of, building Alchemy.
I would have the imagination that there are other people on this call that have that same inkling, John, that they've seen connection happen in a way that feels magical or easy or deeper than usual. And Anne brought up this thing around sort of it's not just the bar. It's not just, it's like there's some different things happening. And I think that's one of these undercurrents in the wave of why we're seeing businesses here is because people are just yearning for depth, real community, real connection. Now, you guys went from these like hopeful moments to today, there's actually humans coming into spaces like this in San Francisco. And that might not be the full vision, but Anne, I'm gonna be tour guide here with photos for a second. And I want you guys to just get a snapshot with some visuals and do a little bit of commentary on what are we seeing here as we go through the slideshow.
Yeah, so today we have what we're calling a soft launch sort of preview experience that we've stood up. So our space is, it's incredible. It's a very unique space. It's a ground floor with a basement and a 2,500 square foot backyard in the middle of this kind of urban block in San Francisco. So from the outside, you'd have no idea that this kind of oasis in the backyard is there with avocado trees and palm trees. And so we've took the money that we raised. San Francisco is a notoriously challenging city for real estate development. I mean, I like to say we chose the hardest city at the hardest time. San Francisco lost more of its residents than any other major urban city during the pandemic. And no one wanted to invest in San Francisco. So it was a phenomenal uphill battle. But we got through the city, which is also known for being extraordinarily challenging. And we took the money that we raised and opened this preview experience in the backyard. And we have this incredible sauna by an award-winning architect. It fits about 40 people. We think it's the largest freestanding like sauna structure. And we started bringing customers through, building community and particularly having an experience to show investors what we mean, because you can say it in words, but unless they've experienced sauna talk, right? Dropping in and meeting people, they don't really get it. And it's been night and day from the moment we have opened it. Checks have been flying in, investors have been experiencing it and seeing what a unique thing it is, and the community's been growing. So yeah, it's our preview experience.
So I'm hearing preview. It wasn't the big vision. In the current iteration, we're going to get back to some of the big vision things and some of the hurdles, but in the current space, I know there's a lot of backyard sauna garden moments, hot and cold therapies, and then photo here and some other ones. You guys are working with a lot of practitioners, doing a lot of events, some of those things. Just color around the edges there for me. What are the other types of things do people get to come be a part of at Alchemy right now?
Yeah. So actually, when we first got the space, while we were in design of the bathhouse on the basement interior in this backyard, we opened up the upstairs as kind of a wellness social club and began hosting all sorts of events while we were in design and development on the downstairs. And so we still have that open today, and we have wellness programming about 4 days a week. We do tons of other interesting private events, everything from immersive art shows and live music, breathwork, sound healing, yoga, some of the things you'd imagine, women's retreats, book launches. And we even have been doing a bunch of corporate events, which is fascinating because even companies, particularly tech companies now, are looking for different spaces where they can really change their mindset and have their teams connect in a deeper way. So we've actually been doing a lot of corporate events as well.
So I'm assuming, because I have 1,000 questions now, what you've laid out, I'm assuming there's some people on the call who also have questions. So if you are somebody who's like, I heard something from Anne, like, oh my gosh, how hard was it to build in an urban center? How we got permitting for that, working with our city, insert what's the event programming that's been working. I want you to ask those over in the Q&A. So if you guys are following along here and your brain's starting to fill with questions, shoot those over and we'll get to those. And talk a little bit about this. I mean, I love that it's open. I love that. How long from idea to some type of pitch deck to some type of doors being open to the public? What are we talking here? Give me the scale of this idea. You didn't think about this like last month, right?
No, honestly, this has been a very long time. I first had the idea 7 years ago. I really began working on the business plan 6 years ago. It took us, 2 to 3 years to find this building. And originally, we had a much bigger vision for this space, a 3-story. It was our dream bathhouse that we wanted to build, but it was just phenomenally expensive. It was just too high risk in the city, especially with operators that had never run anything. So then we repositioned to this smaller concept a couple of years ago and began to raise for that. So it's been a really long journey. It took us probably about 18 months, almost 2 years to get through design in the city.
So I just want people to hear that, because I think entrepreneurs have this weird amount of crazy as we think things can exist in the world before they do. And we have the ability, hopefully, to will them into existence. And most of us entrepreneurs are optimistic about 2 levels of things. One, how quickly it'll take to make that thing real. And also often how much it costs to build the thing that we want to see in the world. And so I love this story of patience and commitment and determination to the goal that I just always hear from you, Anne, around like, yeah, we just kept working on it. We kept figuring out the way to make it real. Whatever it looked like, it kept looking closer to the thing.
Yep.
Maybe it didn't always feel nice and patience along the way. I have the imagination it also felt difficult and hard and frustrating along the way. How did you make it through? How did you remain patient? How did you keep going and all that?
Can I just say a quick thing?
Yeah.
Which
Do
is
it.
that our architect, Oli Lundberg, amazing. He's worked with very well-known like billionaires and luminary entrepreneurs in San Francisco. And he said that Anne is one of the most inspiring, determined people he's ever met. And I have to agree. And that's why, that's a key thing here is like it took a lot of patience, but like, even on the hardest days, Anne just digs in. And it's like, all right, let's do it. And, and that's how we got through a lot of the city stuff and of course fundraising and, that's what it takes. Right. So I think it's important to...
It's not being too precious about not being too precious of to hold on to your original idea. For us, it's really been an exercise of like, you know, when you're rooted in a why and you're rooted in an outcome, in some ways, it doesn't matter how you get there. As long as that, what you're striving to bring to the world is going to stay true. And so, of course, we had this like amazing epic dream of how our baths could look and found out like there was no way in heck the city was going to let us do that, you know? And so there's just been a lot of those moments and realizing like, what can I do now? What is the first step? Losing, you know, giving up potentially this huge flagship vision for the first one and saying, okay, well, what is a minimum viable product? What's our MVP? What will we feel good enough about bringing into market to prove we can do this? And then we'll build our path towards maybe the bigger dream. And so, you know, sometimes you have these great ideas and you don't want to give up on those things. And it's learning when to pivot and how to pivot. And that flexibility has been crucial.
I suggested that we'd have tweetable moments on the front end. Now I'm just, everybody, did you hear that, right? Did you hear the sort of wisdom to when and how to pivot? I can't agree more. And we have a bunch of like tactical questions coming in here that I love. We're going to get to them. I want to hear, what was the scale of the big vision? It was beautiful. It was hard to build. Put a big round number on it for me, because that helps give us, it does help give us a scale.
Yeah. And listen, there was a strategic reason why you wanted it scale. The larger scale you are, the bigger the margins can be, because these have low labor models, right? So our pitch back then was go big or go home. This is where the business is, right? So it was a $24 million, 3-story, 5 hydrothermal pools, 2 or 3 saunas, steam, tons of treatment rooms, private areas, retail, you know, grab and go cafe, the full works. And yeah, it would have been awesome. But these things are also very expensive to build. And for cities, which even in San Francisco, we have a number of options, but investors don't know these businesses. There's not many of them in the United States. It was just the wrong time to try and sell something that investors were seeing as that big of a risk because of the extraordinary cost up front. And so we positioned smaller. We took the bathing area from what was probably about, 14,000 square feet down to 8,500 square feet for a first concept.
Which is still, just so everybody knows, not small, right? You still have space. I'm sure you're going to fill it up. I'm sure you're filling it up right now. And that's still a risk. That's still a big ask. It's still a push.
Yeah.
So I want to dive in on some of that more, but before we do, John, can you talk a little bit about also cities and why you guys are interested in them, and sort of for you, how this sort of, before we get into the nuance of like, what it took to open the sauna door and what kind of wood we put on the benches, level of detail, I just think you guys are, again, holding this mission and commitment piece. It was a hard time to invest in San Francisco. It was a hard time in the world. And John, you kind of have this background in community development where you were seeing deep needs in the world. Give us a sense of the why from your end of these things.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about cities, right? And so like, or building urban bathhouses. And I just think that, okay, let me step back and share a quick story. Again, I was this head of community. I was living in, this is, pre-COVID, I was living in New York, which is where I'm from, friends and family around. And I would still find myself feeling lonely at times. And I'm like, how does that, someone like that feel? If that's happening to me, then I could only imagine what others might be going through. And for me, I would always, Friday nights, I would go to Spa 88 in New York, Wall Street Baths. And that was my place to either meet my friends or connect with people, or just, recenter myself. And so it's super important to have convenient spaces to do that. I think if people had that option in cities, like way more prevalent, right, of just like, you look at places in, Asia or Europe, where it's like there are many options to do that, that becomes more of the default way to spend leisure time. but we don't have that yet in the United States. So that's the opportunity here, is to make these convenient spaces for people to reconnect with themselves, their friends, their family, their community. And yeah, and it has to be, the key is convenient, right? Because that's how you make the ritual where you're seeing people over and over again, which is the secret, one of the secrets to community buildings. You have to see the same people over and over again to build trust and go deeper and deeper. And so that's, that's how we're thinking about Alchemy. And yeah, that's a real opportunity that we have in North America right now to create that type of environment.
I think there's something important there, and people sometimes gloss this over because, and maybe this is, Anne, what you're talking about how sometimes investors don't get this. We aren't just saying spa, right? We aren't saying spa model where you sort of escape the real world of your life. I'm hearing you guys talk about a third space. I'm hearing you guys talk about coming back again and again. I'm hearing you guys talk about meeting your people there with regularity, which is a different business than once a year, once a quarter, every so often I go and treat myself. Am I picking that up correctly, John, in terms of what you're trying to do?
I try and explain this. I'm still trying to get this right in my mind. As a community builder, if you were just to step back and use first principles and say, how do you connect people in a way that's somewhat analog, that actually, you create a container, it makes them have to mingle together where they more or less become friends just through the environment. And that was your thesis for a social club. You would probably land on something like a bathhouse. Like, how do you get people to get rid of their phones, right? Even at dinner tables, how do you do? You can't do it, right? So, but when you put them in a 200-degree sauna, it's not going to work in there too long, right? And it also it creates that invitation to disconnect from the technology and reconnect, right? So, this is if you just had the process of how do you build community, you'd probably in the modern world, you'd probably land on something like this. So that's one way to look at it too.
And what would you add around sort of either those social components that are the goal or the sort of why for cities for you guys? Because I know you guys care a lot about the ground that is San Francisco, right? And even choosing where you're going to be and going through real estate. Talk just a little bit about sort of the city, the neighborhood that you're goaling around.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are desperate for these kinds of spaces. I think they were, wanting these spaces before the pandemic, but we all just went through a major thing together and there was a lot of isolation. So people are desperate for deeper, more meaningful connections with people, that you see more and more people wanting to skip the small talk. And then we lost a lot of spaces that were community gathering places during the pandemic, and they're starting to sort of reopen. But there's all these macro trends too now, like a new rise of membership clubs and almost like the new country club, right? And these groups, because people are desperate to sort of be together. So, and a lot of what we're finding is a lot of the private events that we're doing are communities in San Francisco who don't have a gathering place for their community, or even if they do, members clubs that exist, right, and have their own space. They're bringing them to Alchemy because it offers this container for their community to drop in a more connecting way than maybe their space does. So there is something about this, and we see that magic. We've been preaching this for a while, and then you open the space and we just had this sauna. I was like, okay, people, have at it. And to see the people of all walks of life dropping into conversation, starting book clubs, meeting and going traveling, starting businesses together. You're like, oh yeah, there it is. It really does do this.
And I think, to Anne's point about why are other members clubs bringing their members to Alchemy here, I think it's because I worked in that space for a while, right? Of like the more exclusive type of membership offering. I think that when you have to apply to something and you have to be someone else to get into, or you have to grandstand or show your accolades to get into a members club, then when you step into that space, you have to become that person each time again, which we're not those people, right? We're not those people. We're just people. And so you have to have a space that you can drop into your human essence and just be whoever you are that day. And that's, I think, one of the big secrets to creating a true, third space, or even some people are calling the fourth space these days, of like where you don't have to be anybody. You can find that richer meaning in human connection.
Mm,
Yeah. I think there's one more point just to add, which is also now because of so much more remote work, another community that people have lost are their work communities. So particularly in like urban cities. So having a space where people can still connect with other people during the day, and then we're in the center of AI. So this is the yin to the yang. It's actually the perfect place to start alchemy because as that world grows, we're going to need more, offline human connection for sure.
I
yeah,
often make the joke, we're in the center of the city and, our sauna is this like dot. It's like this analog dot. And it's like that dot in the yin to the yang, where it's just like the one place where you're in the center of AI and technology, yet it's still analog and ancient.
it's something that's so important right now is this. People are yearning for this. They maybe always have and didn't know it, but it's spiking right now. It's this moment of I actually need this essential human activity that maybe I knew in some spaces. I do liken it to sort of getting around a dinner table together. We think of it in those, to me, like in my family, the second place we gathered, second only to the dinner table, was the sauna. And I'm like, this Finnish American family, so I have it in my blood and my heritage, and my last name has too many vowels and all those things. But I think the thing now is everybody's discovering it, and it's beginning to be accessed more. And you guys are really at the forefront of that. So thank you for sharing thank you for being open about these things. Now, I want to be even more open. John, I want to talk about open sourcing the design, because we have like 1,000 questions waiting in the wings right now. So I want to get to a couple of them. And one of them is like, give me the fundraising process and the rent and the purchase of the property and how that all worked. And I think one of the areas that I thought was really interesting when we were prepping for this was this conversation about, we actually do want to use sort of this informed by tech idea of open sourcing a design for what we're doing today. What did that look like? Why are you doing that? Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about open sourcing what you're up to and getting feedback.
So certainly early on with Alchemy, there was this movement here in Silicon Valley and elsewhere of build with community, right? Where you'd more or less share as a founder, you'd share exactly what's going on in your company, open source, and then you'd more or less get feedback from your customers along that process. We kind of did that, right? So once we had this space, we started hosting events, right? And without any sauna or anything like that, we're just like, all right, let's host events, let's warm up the space, let's meet people. And what we did was we actually did a crowd fund early on, right? So locals can participate in our success. But what was interesting is as we were building out the space, we built a tour room of all of our different mood boards and renderings and what's coming. And as many people as possible, we would take them on the tour. We still do, of just showing what's coming and watching them and asking them, what have you been to? What do you like? What do you think this is nice? And we got some feedback that literally has changed changed some of our plans and our direction. And what we love now is that people will give their own tour of what we've done, because we kind of like, again, it's not us, it's like a collective group doing this. And so now we'll watch the tour ourselves, so it's it's truly building with community in that regard.
And I think that a lot of us, especially if we outsource this to architects and designers, we think we have the best ideas. My favorite example of this is, you open the doors to the bathhouse, and then in a matter of 20 minutes, you realize where you should have put towel hooks because there's a pile of towels on the floor. So like, just in terms of the sort of norms around this, I love the idea. I love this, like, let's start the opening and let's invite as much feedback as we can get on the front end, so that the thing we can create is the most accurate to what people actually need, want, desire, all those things. I think it's also vulnerable. It feels vulnerable to like say, hey, we've polished these areas, but this one feels a little rough. John, has that been a exercise in sort of grit and vulnerability for you to sort of open these doors in a way that isn't the perfect big grand vision yet?
It is an exercise. I'm still in that exercise, right? So that's what makes, I mean, that's what makes a great partnership with Anne, is that she's she's okay. You know, she's great with being vulnerable and being like, okay, let's move things forward, and it's not going to be perfect. And you know, and again, we're going to build with community. I'm more perfectionist. I'm like, no, do not look at that wall right there. It's not yet finished, you know. And so it's, yeah, it's been a great exercise in vulnerability. And again, back to community building, that is one of the secrets to community building is vulnerability and being able to show yourself and be like, it's not perfect and we need help, right? And so then we get to build with, you know, folks around us who have sometimes better ideas. And I'll tell you, I love asking people, especially when we're giving a tour, it's like, what bathhouses have you been to? What's your favorite moment, right? And learning from that and seeing if we can, you know, build something that is informed by that. So yeah, but it's been a journey to get out of that perfectionist mindset and just be like, okay, it's going to be okay. And we're building together.
I was surprised at how much people loved the combination of the rawness with the beautiful architecture. So for example, I mean, this sauna, it really is an architectural masterpiece, beautiful. Our indoor lounge that was attached to it, which had not been developed yet, has bright royal blue concrete and had fluorescent orange spray paint outlines of where the future things was going to be, and these open ceiling plates, you know, and we'd have like this beautiful furniture just sitting on this concrete with raw brick and unfinished wood beams. People loved that. They felt like they were being invited into our home and invited on the journey. And so every time people come back, they'd see something new. You know, for example, we saw customers trying to rest and lay down across the sofas to get some sun on a sunny day. We're like, oh, we need some sun loungers. Put those out. And we're like, oh, people are holding their towels over their heads because they're getting burned. We need a shady area. So then we put that out. And so each time they come back, it's sort of like they see something they've needed. And so now they feel like they really are a part of this growing, which has been beautiful.
People want to root for stuff, right? They want to be a part of the thing growing. And I think that when you talk a lot about this kind of third space social dynamic and sort of thinking in scales of neighborhoods, which, you know, cities are shrinking, not just in population, but in their sort of geographical, how people navigate them. People want more walkable space. They want to connect with they want to know who roasts their coffee beans and makes their food, and also who heats the sauna up that they go to a few times a week, right? Like, and that idea of sort of being at a scale that's still a human scale for you guys and being willing to bring people along the journey is a superpower. Sometimes, and this is maybe for our folks listening in, everything on Instagram and online looks so much shinier than it is in real life, right? And that is so true all the time. And I think it can bring up a lot of insecurities, a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of like, oof, I don't think we're going to ever do it as good as insert other space. And you guys sort of took the riskier route of saying, well, let's open the doors. Let's start serving the people, and we'll figure out the details of that as we go. And in the doing comes the insight. The insight follows the action.
Yeah, there's a mantra that a friend told me, which is action creates information, which is the opposite of how I typically operate. I'm like, oh, I got to research a ton of things and like then take action. No, it's a balance, but it's like, yeah, action creates information.
So I want to come to a couple of things here that are coming in the chat. So, Anne, give me sort of a broad strokes on sort of funding and what that was like, what you've done. There's probably a funding package, and share as, you know, you can be as sort of open book or closed and appropriate as you need, but roughly what has been the approach? What have you done? And what's been the impact? Because I'm also hearing some sort of stages, right? This isn't the $24 million space. You've done a few rounds. Give us a little bit of that as people are asking about it.
Yeah, wow. We've tried a lot. Like I said, it was a really challenging time when we first started. I mean, we tried everything from, you know, we were successful in the crowdfund. We have some amazing advisors on our team who were kind to sort of open their networks and their Rolodex. I think at the time it wasn't the right time for such a big project, but we even did, we found like a fundraising cold email system that would A/B test copy and like dial it in. And like we were emailing like thousands of executives in the health and wellness industry a week. We actually did land a couple from there. And then when we really pivoted and were able to gather and be in person again, all of that fundraising was when we couldn't be face to face. And one of the lessons I've learned, especially in this, is that it really is about relationships, and that cold approach was never going to work. And so now we have, we started curating sort of groups of people that we thought might want to invest, and we'd bring them together to experience the sauna together, right? And drive more awareness of what we were doing. And then we have QR codes up around the space. And we just closed a major round. And 75% of those investors were people that came, loved the space so much that they wanted to be a part of it. So having that something people could experience was really night and day. I think one of the things that's been challenging, particularly in our market, is we have a lot of people in tech. And in tech, you might 1000x your returns. And then we have people in real estate. And for this business, the margins and the returns on this type of four-wall business, as they call it, are very, very good, but they're not as good as tech. And then sometimes real estate and other hospitality investors that are used to restaurants and things like that, they go, oh, no way, you can't make these margins. These are crazy. So you got one side telling them it's not enough and another side saying, I don't believe that. So it's been a real role in educating every single investor on what's happening in the world right now, what's happening in the US, why we need these, and also why this is a good business, like breaking down the strengths of the business model, because there's not a lot of these. So as a fundraiser, you're in the role of educating people on what this business is. Unlike investment in other things, which are all across the country. So that's what we've had to do. And as part of that, we started this community of bathhouse operators across the country because we needed to find out what was happening, right? And thankfully from that, we became sort of the knowledge gatherers and, the folks that could tell people what's happening around the country.
I think that's so wise to talk about these two different types of investors. And it's so important because that you being an educator is absolutely what needs to happen. And who your investors are really does matter in this. And I would just want people to sort of double down as they're thinking about funding a project, as they're thinking about building it out. There's 1,000 hurdles that you're going to go through. But one of these things of like locking in your vision of what you're trying to do, doing the actual homework of the numbers of what you're trying to achieve, and not just your sort of like hopeful, I think we can get this many people here. I think we can, this is what it's going to cost. Like, I think actually getting into number crunching budgets and spreadsheets around these kinds of things really matters. And I've seen a wave of businesses do kind of like what you're doing, which is get people tasting the food first, right? It's a la carte to the food truck model. It's if you want to start a restaurant and you've never been a chef anywhere, but you're great at making food, the thing you need to do is invite people to taste your food in every single way possible. And I'm hearing that around sort of getting people in the door to the bathhouse. And that is a thing that we're seeing in multiple spots, because right now, everyone on this call, we are a weird 3% of the population that cares about this stuff. Can I just contextualize us? I know it's on your feed every day, every swipe of your finger. You see somebody in a cold plunge or somebody in a sauna. We are not the norm. We're weird. We're total geeks on all this. And so inviting people in to sort of taste the food, to see the experience, to feel the experience is what's needed right now about being educators around all these kinds of things. John, would you go a layer deeper there around this idea of creating, sort of audience versus community? I think you and I have really been, and that to me just jumped off the page when you started talking about that.
Yeah, and doing a podcast or doing this doesn't even feel like a podcast. It really isn't. It feels like we're all, around the table of sorts digitally, if you can do that, right? And so, you with Cedar and Stone have done an amazing job of actually building, some level of a true community, even digitally, like we're talking now, but certainly, as, building this like collective. But what I'll say is a lot of brands that I've seen, certainly in our industry, but other industries, will claim that they're building these communities, and you'll see they have amazing brands, and they're, they get a lot of likes on social, and there's certainly conversations happening digitally. But again, who am I to define it? But I would define community as if you're building a connection, a collective of people who then, of course, become friends outside of what you're building, right? With Alchemy, we're so proud that when we see people leave the sauna, I know they didn't know each other because I welcomed a lot of those folks in. They literally become friends. They're trading contact information. Then they ask us for restaurant recommendations because they're all going to hang out after, or people have started a book club after. That's, in my opinion, true community building, where it's like, we've become like the moment that connected them, but then they go live their lives outside of this. And I don't want to call out certain wellness concepts that have claimed community, because there are definitely ones that have done a good job, but at the same time, it's like, are your people actually dropping in with each other during that experience? And then, is there some level of measurability that they've gone on to go spend time outside of your space? And I think that's the difference between community and audience, right?
So great. So great. And hard to do. And you really have to sort of be there and be with real humans, warts and all. You kind of like have to deal with the messiness of that, as opposed to just posts of pretty people doing a thing in the wellness industry in your space.
Yeah.
I assume you have names and faces to those, like, yeah, this is these are our people who are here every week.
Yeah, I'm a big ClassPass user, so I go to all sorts of wellness studios, right, for mainly fitness, and they're all like, and maybe it's because it's the nature of ClassPass, but they're like, oh yeah, you're now in our community, and I'm like, I was in your space for exactly 3 minutes outside of the fitness experience, so I didn't have a chance to really dive in with people. And by the way, that's not my intentionality. My intentionality is to do fitness here, whereas I think that's where a bathhouse can really play nicely with those rest of the fitness, the studio fitness world, where it's like, no, this is the place that you can actually drop in, slow down, and really connect with people, right? And so that's where, the community magic happens.
I think that's a helpful distinction, because in the world right now in the US, we're actually seeing a lot of fitness concepts around sauna and cold plunge, which is different than social space, which is different than community space, which is different than traditional or cultural bathhouse, in that they see those things, hot and cold as modalities, as pieces of workout equipment. Okay, I do my workout, 10 minutes in the sauna, 3 minutes in the cold plunge, I'm on to my next thing. I think we're going to see a wave of those. I think those will, like many fitness modalities, have more of a fad trend than bathhouses that we look across the world have stood for decades, generations, and in some places centuries, right? And I think what we're aiming for, and what you guys are building, is that, like, how do we sink roots into the real ground to be here for decades? I want to ask some specific questions here. There's some folks that are asking, what is membership like? How do you do classes? What are the hours? Let's get like just one layer nitty gritty on what's working in terms of how people patronize, they actually come and give you money as a business. What does that look like?
So today we are basically just a drop-in pass model. We haven't done membership yet, which I'll touch on in a second, but folks come in, we say 120 minutes for a visit, but we don't, if the session afterward is not full, we've had people stay 5-6 hours. We don't really care. That was more because people that were new to this didn't know how long it takes. And it's like, hey, stay as long as you want to, right? As long as we've got the space. So that's the model. And we have kind of what we call open community sauna sessions, where they just get to use the sauna garden. And then we have a lot of this wellness programming or other programming where you can just do that. You could just do the yoga class, for example, or you can buy a combo ticket and then bathe afterwards. And that's been really unique and interesting to see, for example, like a personal development workshop, and then dropping into the sauna afterwards. The participants in that workshop were very much in a class, and then they got to go down into the sauna, and they got to really connect over what they had just learned in that class. So that's a really cool format we're seeing, to like learn and then come sauna together. We've launched pass packs. 5-pass and 10-pass packs. And then we are currently thinking through how we want to approach membership. It's a very tricky question for us that we want to get right. We absolutely want to stay inclusive to the kind of communal spirit of bathing, but we also have members that want to come often and want a discount for coming often. What's best for the business might not to be to do memberships, because we've learned that a lot of the bathhouses are clawing back or getting rid of memberships because there's so much demand, and a ticket that could be going for $65 is 16, say, for example. But at the same time, we want people to come back and build community. So we're looking into and we'll test different models that allow us to kind of balance both of those sides, the business and the community.
Yeah, David's just giving a comment on this right now, and he's saying, you know, if you thought about off-peak, on-peak hours, I found that this can complicate memberships for users. I mean, I think these are decisions that they seem so like, yeah, implement it. To Anne's point here, test, figure out, actually run the numbers, and both run the numbers on like what the P&L needs and what the business intention is. Because, and we talked about this before, in the day-to-day, month-to-month P&L, it might look better to have less members. But if you look at that one, especially at the beginning, those members who are your most raving fans, who are like literally touring people around the space, right? You said this, you don't even give the tours sometimes. The people who are there give the tours because they're a member who comes back multiple times a week. They're the kind of folks who are going to be so championed for the larger goals that I would just invite people to look at short, medium, and long-term goals for their customers and guests, as opposed to just what is the one, you know, what's the one ticket say, and what's the margin on that one ticket.
Yeah. And also test and learn. Don't go all in on something that would be very hard to claw back. You know, start small, you know, and test and learn how that feels. Yeah.
So what are some of the big kind of hurdles that you ran into in launching? This could have been city, this could have been regulation. There's like a bunch of conversations in here. This is one of the areas of questions that keep coming up. What would you say to people who are eyeing towards maybe starting a business like this as it relates to all the red tape and problem solving around opening these types of businesses? John, you're just smiling right now
I
because I
know.
know there's examples of this in your head.
No, because when I was excited to build the business, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I get to like hang out in a hot tub with friends and bring people into the space and like be kind of a steward in that way. And in reality, it's waking up 5 a.m. on Saturday and having to physically take apart a cold plunge, put it back together, and learn how to do that on the fly. And we've had to do certain things with our sauna again because things break, right? And just it's way more it's way more mechanical and technical and dealing with a lot of maintenance than I at least realized. And we knew it'd be part of the job, but like, you know, I make the joke where it's like at this point I could take apart our cold plunge and rebuild it, kind of like Forrest Gump did with his, you know, with his gun in the movie, where it's just like so fast because we've had to do it so many times, right? So just stuff like that just kind of unexpected, and things break and things get dirty and you have to be down to clean and do all the things, which we are happy to do, but it's like it's nonstop. So I think that's real.
Yeah, it's a big shift going from like a computer-based job to being on your feet, you know, and we have limited staff right now. I can talk about a model that we're using, but you know, I had a 14-hour day the other day. Sometimes I'll do 12, 15,000 steps just in our own space in one day. It's pretty physically exhausting. But some of our big challenges were you know, just working with the city through code. There's actually, it really depends on your city, but in San Francisco, there wasn't a lot of code on sauna. It's seen as like an outdoor structure with a stove. Other cities, there's a ton of regulation around sauna. That wasn't necessarily the best for us, because if there's not explicit code around something, it's totally open to interpretation of who you get at the desk, if they're going to allow it or not, and how they're going to rule that. So there's a lot of challenges, I think, around that. Finding a site is really hard. you can't secure a site unless you have the capital. But you can't get the capital unless you have the site, because your whole entire business model and capacity and how long it's going to take if you have a historical building or everything is on the site. So it's this weird dance of like hoping the two line up. You know, that was really, really challenging. Yeah. And then I think our particular site didn't have the electric capacity that we needed. It's a year-long wait for electricity. So we really had to think through, okay, how are we going to operate this in the short term till we can get, you know, the funding and the electricity upgrades. We had to switch to gas stoves initially, and just all sorts of things like that.
I think that's a helpful theme as people are starting, is that you are calculating your own risk tolerance for sort of the next step every single time.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we maybe have in our head an imagination of it's just the risk of like getting the funding or investing, and then it's the risk of opening the door. But you've just described this like spectrum of moments where it was like, wait, we need an architect to design a thing. We need to figure out where the building goes. We need to like sign a lease. We also need investors to say yes to that, to do some of those things. And you are always saying, well, what's the next, what ball can we roll forward to get to that next layer? And there isn't just a quick path for that. And so folks who are kind of thinking like, oh, there's probably a playbook. Well, maybe for some city, but to your point, Anne, there are plenty of cities where this code isn't written yet, where we don't have examples of these type of businesses on every corner. You're going to go open a coffee shop, there are plenty of codes. If you're going to go open a restaurant, that is well-worn pathway that your city will say, okay, here's what it looks like. And I think these are areas where just managing your own risk tolerance and your ability to say yes to the next risk, and also measure it with good voices around you, so you're not just taking big worrisome risks at every single turn, just, you know, at that. How have you, and I want to sort of help us land the plane here, how have you, Anne, sort of stayed regulated, even not burnt out, not blown up your life and your relationships around doing this really hard thing, even for the good of the people? I think sometimes that's the symptom that we get as entrepreneurs who are taking too much risk and burning out and doing 14 hours a day, but are feeling burnt out. How have you managed to sort of stay patient and continue to go forward over the last 6 years on this?
Well, I have a very personal story. So this, about 6 years ago, when I really started working on this, my mother got sick and she ended up passing 5 years ago. But in that period, and towards the end of her life, she saw the fire lit in me and she's like, I know you're going to do this. I can see it. I can feel it. So for me, this entire thing was just a beautiful opportunity to turn my grief into something beautiful that represented her in the world. I had to be the parts of her that were tenacious and resilient and all the things to do this. So honestly, like there's no greater reward than working hard. I mean, honestly, it's been a gift. It's been extraordinarily challenging. But those little wins like are what made it all worth it, you know? So yeah, it's that. And then also now it's like, hey, we end the day in the sauna in our robes and sandals. You can't feel that bad for us, you know?
You guys, thank you so much. We are running very close to out of time right now. I want to say thank you for all your wisdom. We didn't get to every question in here. I know there's more depth. I know there's more folks that people are like, oh my goodness, this was really helpful. They're already sort of saying thank you. And just for some folks, we will be sending out the recording of this. So if any of this was helpful and you want to send it to somebody, or if you want to look back on it, absolutely, we'll send that out. Secondarily, please go check out Alchemy Springs. Please go visit them in San Francisco. Go follow them online, follow them on all the things. And if you're somebody who's looking in for investment opportunities, these guys would be happy to take your money and help put it into good place and make it serve a community in real ways. And so if that's you, feel free to talk to them about it. I also want to highlight kind of one thing here is these conversations we think are really helpful. We hope you found some value in it. If you did find this helpful and you're wanting to go further, 60 minutes is never enough. We have a community of Sauna Business Accelerator that we run for folks who are wanting to start businesses like this. It is a 12-month program where we walk folks through everything from how to clarify your vision, to figure out the legalities of it in your city, to map out the business model, to do the marketing and open the doors. And if that would be helpful, our team would love to work with you on that. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your vision and see if that would work for you. John and Ann, you guys, thank you for being here. Thanks for like opening up and being super vulnerable about this big process. What a joy. John, thanks again. Please keep doing the true community versus audience. It's inspiring to see, and we really appreciate it.
Likewise, Justin, and thank you for having us. And just, yeah, you have an amazing group, and I love how engaged everyone is. So really good to connect here. And yeah, thanks for having us on the show.
Absolutely. And any final parting words for us, encouragements for folks who are launching into all this?
Just don't give up. There's always a way. Now is the time. This is the market. Just don't give up.
Love it. So you guys, you heard her. Don't give up. Keep pressing on. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Appreciate it, you guys. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.